Welcome to the Traveling Cup.
Episode 2.
All right, well, welcome to the Traveling Cup. This podcast is for coffee lovers like me who like to meet interesting people doing interesting things to change the world, one step at a time. I'm obsessed with morning rituals and like to think that the way I start my day models the decisions I make the rest of the day. If I start right, I end right. Throughout the next several months, I've lined up interviews with real movers and shakers doing some amazing things to be productive and build social changing businesses. So pour your favorite morning brew and join in. This episode is brought to you by Climbing Fish, a group of connectors based in New York City that are dedicated to reconnecting people with conversations that matter, and in doing so, helping you find your true genius. Find out more information at climbingfish.com.
All right, well, today I did something a little bit, I like to think, unique. Some may call it different, some may call it weird. But I couldn't decide what I wanted to have for my cup of coffee this morning. And so what I actually did is I purchased a percolator, a French press, and then I had my regular drip coffee machine. And I kind of wanted to end the debate of which way is really the best way to brew your coffee. And I remember one time about 7 years ago, I had taken my bike to Spain and I was cycling through the Pyrenees, and I ended up exhausted after a long ride through the mountains in a small little French town outside of Andorra. And I remember this really nice woman poured me the most delicious cup of coffee I have ever had in my entire life. And I have been trying to replicate that cup ever since. So this morning, I took the percolator, the drip machine, and the French press, and I put all three to the test. And I tried this Bob's Organic French roast, and it was absolutely delicious. I tried all three. Was one of them anywhere close to the cup that I had in Spain? Absolutely not. But were they all delicious? Yes. All right, so today on the show, we're going to be talking with Jessica Masters. I'm really excited to get to talk to her because I met her at a convention in New York City on dreamers and how students rather could become dreamers and they could dream a lot more. It was based off of Seth Godin's book, The Icarus Deception, which gets people to fly high, not be afraid to have their wings melt, kind of like Icarus's wings had melted. So it gets people to think that they could do a lot more than perhaps they're doing right now. Anyways, I apologize if you hear a cat in the background. I just got a kitten named Yoda, and Yoda just keeps on walking around, and he doesn't like to be outside the studio. So if you hear a little bit of meowing, or like right now I'm getting whacked in the face, it's Yoda playing a little joke on me. So anyways, I'm gonna leave Yoda alone. Say bye, buddy. And we're gonna go ahead and get into this interview with Jessica Masters. I hope you enjoy it. I hope you start dreaming, and I hope you get some inspiration out of it. Here we go.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Traveling Cup podcast. Today with me, I have Jessica Masters. She teaches us not to wait until retirement and imagines what if young people started living their dreams right now. She is absolutely the most inspirational dreamer I've ever met. So I'd like to welcome to the show, Jessica. Welcome to the show, Jessica. Hi.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Mark.
You're very welcome. So Jessica, there's a lot that I want to talk about today, and I really do want to talk a lot about dreaming and what exactly it means to dream, because I think that a lot of our listeners, they're sitting there listening to us and they are dreamers. They really want to achieve their dreams and be the best that they can, but perhaps they're struggling to do so. But could you tell us a little bit about who you are? How would you introduce yourself? How would you describe what it is exactly that you do with Earthhorn?
So my name is Jessica, and I started Earthhorn because I believe in the power of our dreams to shape our lives in really beautiful ways, and to start the discussion about what it means to be a dreamer and why our dreams matter, and to sort of challenge the dismissal that those kind of words can get a person when they have the courage to talk about their dreams. And so, yeah, I just want to help people dream big for their personal and their professional lives.
So, could you tell us a little bit about? I mean, what exactly got you to that? You know, how did you see a lot of people? Because I know through getting to know you and looking through your website, it's pretty amazing how much you've traveled. I mean, I don't know necessarily, but I imagine that you've traveled to the four corners of the world, and I know that I see some of the quotes you have on your website are from Paul Coelho with The Alchemist and that. So, in your travels, did you like see people that just weren't achieving their dreams, or did how exactly did you get to that? What made you start Earthhorn?
I would say that when I traveled, I encountered more people who were living in accordance with, resonant with what they believe in, and they were living the lives that were true to themselves. And what made me start Earthhorn was because the majority of the people that I encountered that made me feel that there's this lack of dreaming. It's in our culture, it's here at home. And when the very first experience that I had outside of this country was in Costa Rica, which we recently talked about, and it was my first experience. I was living with a host family, and it was my first experience of poverty. And when I came back, my whole family shared a single room so that I could have my own bedroom. And my sister's walking around with this pair of flip-flops that was worn all the way through. It's her only pair of shoes. And so I came back to the States where everything is really big and clean, and there's so much of it. And it blew my mind, the disparity. I just couldn't reconcile it in my brain. And so I decided to study international development when I went to university, because I wanted to find some way of impacting, that disparity. I wanted to know why the world was the way that it was. And so I did that. I studied for 4 years, and I got it in my head while I was studying that I would start an NGO. I was going to go to one of the places that I'd studied, and I was going to start an NGO, and maybe I would empower girls, and so I decided that the first thing I had to do out of school was go to India, because it was one of the places that I really studied a lot for my undergrad. So I went to India and spent 4 months there, and I learned a whole lot. But the two things that I will share right now is that, number one, my whole degree was so misguided and neocolonialistic and paternalistic and just so presumptuous that, to think that you can go into a country that you didn't grow up in, you don't speak the language, even if you spent 20 years there and learned the language, learned Hindi, and, integrated among the people, you could never hope to have any true understanding that the person who's lived there their whole lives has. And so this idea that I'd been nurturing for 6 years, that I was going to start an NGO to impact these things, evaporated. And for the first time, I felt very lost about my purpose, and I had to figure it out again. And so the other thing that I realized when I was at a meditation retreat in silence for 10 days was that before I had any hope of building something bigger than myself, I have to figure out who I am and what I'm about and what I believe in and what I value. And any person who doesn't take the time to figure those things out, to excavate their own personal truths, they're going to build a dysfunctional organization. Organizations are made of people. Dysfunctional people will build a dysfunctional organization. So I came back from India with my head reeling from surrendering what I thought was my purpose. And, I just followed where I thought I should go. I seized opportunities when they felt right. I moved to New York. And I thought that I would write. I thought I'm going to write. And so I moved to New York, and I worked in publishing, and I worked in a bar, and I wrote for a dating blog, and I took a playwriting class, and I did all these things thinking that I'm going to write. I'm going to excavate this thing that I've always loved, which is writing. And that's my purpose. And maybe it's writing. And after a year in New York, I was so overwhelmed by all of the opportunity that was there. I mean, writing is definitely a part of my purpose, but I realized that I couldn't just spend my whole life writing about dating,
Right.
So I left New York. And when I left New York, as soon as I escaped the city, I had this epiphany that my mom was talking to me, and she just talked about the way that I was living my life in a way that made me see the value of my seeking the experiences that called to me. Getting on a one-way flight to India, moving to New York at the drop of a hat to pursue writing and this playwriting class that came up, and how so often people don't feel that they have the permission to make decisions like that. They have to be practical and they have to be responsible, and their choices have to make sense to everybody else that they're trying to justify their choices to. Whereas when I look back on all those experiences that I had up until that moment, each one taught me amazing lessons that I couldn't have learned any other way. And so that prompted me to start a website called the Shuck It List, shuckitlist.com. And it was all about achieving your dream experiences while you're young and learning from them and using those lessons to inform the rest of your life. And then, in keeping with that theme, I took up an opportunity to go. My brother was starting to hike the Appalachian Trail. So I said, I'll go with you for 2 weeks. I'll see you off on your journey. And I went, and after 2 weeks, I was like, I gotta finish this. I gotta finish this thing. And so I hiked the AT. And while I was blogging about hiking the Appalachian Trail, 2,000 miles,
Wait,
more
so
than that.
let me just make sure you hiked the entire
I hiked
Appalachian Trail.
the whole Appalachian Trail.
Did you read Into the Woods before or after
I
that?
did. A walk in the woods. I did.
Oh, that's what I meant. A Walk in the Woods. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, I love Bill Bryson. He's so great.
I just read that.
And I have a lot of respect that he wrote the book even though he didn't finish. I have a lot of respect for that.
He was pretty funny too, and he was pretty open about the fact that he couldn't.
Yeah,
he
for
couldn't
sure.
finish it.
I mean, it's really well, anyway, that's a whole other story. But so while I was hiking the AT, that website got hacked, and I lost everything. But it enabled me to sort of take a broader view of things. So while I was hiking the trail, I could go on for hours about what I learned from hiking the trail, but it really expanded my idea of I went from just achieving your dream experiences to this is related to dreaming and creativity and innovation and education and, the way we perceive what's possible. And, it just became so much broader in my mind and in my heart. And I felt by the time I finished the trail and I had completed something that was so much bigger than anything I'd ever completed before. And I knew that I was capable of doing big things. And I knew also that everybody is capable of doing big things. And yet we look up at this enormous mountain and we just look at the mountain and we're like, that's too big for me. I can't make it. But the secret is that you have to break it down into 5 million steps and take them one at a time. And so my conception of what it means to dream and to dream big just really radically changed by hiking the AT. And so Earthhorn was born, and now it's connected to, it's just a much bigger sphere, and it keeps going all these different directions, and I meet people who are working in the space, and they say, have you thought about this? And I'm like, I never thought about that, and it gets even bigger. And so it's just very exciting.
So I like what you're saying as far as, we all kind of have this Everest-style dream. And I think that's a beautiful quote that you said there. You have to break it down into 5,000 steps.
5 million steps. That's how many on the AT.
Oh, is that really how many?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
They say it's the equivalent of ascending and descending Mount Everest 15 times.
Wow. Well, I know the AT goes through. I jog sometimes on the AT near where I live in Bear Mountain, New York area. But yeah, it's beautiful, but I have never even done audience. I've never even done close to the whole thing. So kudos to Jessica for doing the whole thing. That's fantastic. Jess, could you talk? I want to shift course just a little bit because earlier on you said that your degree was misguided. Is that right? Okay, and so you said that your degree was misguided. And I know through looking at your website and getting to know you a little bit more too that you tend to target students, or at least that type of that type of market. And I know you're doing this thing called the 100 Dream Challenge, which I think is a really, really, really beautiful concept for all of our listeners to really check out. But could you talk a little bit about, the education system, and perhaps, I mean, are you sensing that there is a disconnect between you in school and then what's actually expected of you, of the disconnect between the real world, I guess the students still like to call it the quote real world, and the academic world?
Certainly. Well, my experience in formal education, I will say, first of all, that I was extremely fortunate. I was able to attend some really great schools. And I'm really grateful for the education that I was able to take advantage of. With that said, I always chafed. I always chafed because I was raised to ask questions, and my questions were never appreciated in the classroom. And so um, that contributed to, I was labeled sort of a problem student, and it just wasn't the place. I could not understand how the things I was learning or was supposed to learn were relevant to my life, as you say, real life, or whatever it is. And nobody could convince me that it was pertinent. Nobody could answer my questions, and they didn't want to. They were annoyed. I did have some really great teachers, and one of them, my Spanish teacher, is he's the one who got me to. He's the one who encouraged me to go to Costa Rica and have that experience, which really launched this journey that I had no idea, would take me this way. And so I'm so grateful to him, and some other great teachers I had. But I will say that as I get further and further away from my experience in the formal education system, I just become increasingly convinced that it's no longer preparing students for success in this economy or in their lives, or not only is it not preparing them for personal security, but in terms of personal fulfillment. I think that we spend so much time pretending that we know what information needs to be memorized, and there's very little discussion of what it all means. Talk about that big picture. How does this fit in with everything else? There's relevance has no place in any of it, and that's one of those. When you talk about creativity, you talk about innovation. Our economy is no longer competitive because industrially, the industrial paradigm is dead, and so the way for us to stay competitive is to innovate. We're the innovators, and there's nothing new under the sun. Everything that's new is at the intersection of things, and it's combining things that already exist into a new whole. It's being able to come up with 100 answers to the same question. What are your dreams? It's not what is the answer to this equation. There's only one right answer. In school, there's only one right answer a lot of the times. But the skills that kids need in order to become innovators are the ability to think of 100 different questions. It's the ability to recognize patterns in big swaths of information, and we're not giving kids the opportunity to investigate that part of themselves.
Yeah, I like what you're saying here, and especially because you say earlier you were talking about that a lot of people, they feel that their choices have to be practical, right? And so you kind of alluded to it there with saying that that there's a change, right, in the economy and the way that our society is structured. So let's talk about that just for a minute here, because I know that's a lot. That's something that I love to read. I love my background is in education, so I'm all about how what exactly do students really need? What is the economy really like? And there's a lot of people out there like Seth Godin, Daniel Pink, Sir Ken Robinson, Richard Branson. The list goes on that talk about how that the industrial society is, lack of a better term, it's dead, or at least it's not as needed. So, did you want to elaborate a little bit on that from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, when you look around, the two big driving forces of human progress, it's technology and population growth. And when you put those things together, you can sum up the fate of students who outsource their education entirely to school in one word. And that word is outsourced. With increasingly automated technologies that can perform all of the tasks that require analytical, systematic, sort of linear thinking. they're going to be outsourced either to markets that can do it cheaper or to machines, that can do it more efficiently, or both. And, you go walk into the grocery store, and where there used to be 10 clerks, now there are 2 clerks, waiting for the guy who's trying to pay with his dry cleaning receipt to ring the call button for help, and all the rest are self-checkout machines. And it's only going to increase. We're literally, if it's like this, an exponential curve, we're literally just starting to explode, and it's only going to get faster. And so to continue to emphasize linear thinking models in the classroom, you are literally preparing students for economic obsolescence. You are leading them down the garden path to being obsolete, to, and maybe not obsolete, but, you're definitely not realizing the full potential of that person. I love your quote that you have under your Skype name, which is about everybody has a unique genius, but if you ask a fish to climb a tree, he's going to spend his whole life thinking that he's a failure, because fish are designed to climb trees. Anyway, I'm getting a little off track, but I really believe that we need innovators, and we need to encourage kids to think creatively and to play and to investigate and to fail, and not think of it as this terrible disaster that you'll never recover from because your grade is always going to be an F, but as an opportunity to learn, what didn't work so that you can get closer to what does work.
So let me ask you, because you use the term outsourced, and then you talk about school and how it got me thinking about how we fit everything into kind of a really small, tight, concrete box. And so learning takes place at school. And I know that's something that you believe in, and you talk about with your company, that school is just one part of a person's education, correct?
Yes.
So, and I know we sort of touched base on that a little bit, but is there anything else you wanted to add as far as, for our listeners out there who are saying, well, I learned a lot in school, but that was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Maybe talk a little bit about, because sometimes maybe even it's just you are learning a lot, but because it's not donned as school, it's not given the title of school, that maybe if we just never even realize that actually we can take that opportunity as an incredible learning adventure.
For sure. I believe that we're fortunate to have access to school. Don't get me wrong, I think it's an important part of an education, but I really believe that it's dangerous to hand over the reins for your education to an institution. I mean, your frame of mind, the way that you think, your brain is the only one that you are ever going to have, and it's the only way that you're ever going to experience the world. And so if you don't take responsibility for nurturing the connections that don't get addressed in school, then they're going to get pruned, and you're going to your brain will literally lose its physical capacity to make those connections as easy as they would if you had nurtured that. And I just really believe that learning, the way that we learn things most effectively, is by doing. And so much of school focuses on, retaining information and just hearing information secondhand. The people who wrote the books went out and did something and then wrote about it, and that's what makes them an authority. Experience is what makes you an authority. If somebody says to you, I speak from experience, what do you assume? You assume that they know what they're talking about because they've been there and they've done that.
Right.
And so I just want to encourage people to look at the world as one enormous, open-aired, beautiful, receptive classroom where you have the permission to learn about anything that piques your interest, any of your curiosities, because I really believe that the things that we feel naturally drawn to, things that compel us toward them, are the things that we're meant to learn about. I think that's how you discover, people talk so much, how do I discover, I don't have any passion, how do I discover what I'm passionate about? And if you investigate in the world the things that you enjoy just for the sake of how they make you feel, the things that you're good at, because we're all born with talents and skills and we can hone them. A lot of them are crafts. They don't just, not just hit struck by lightning, you have to work on them. and also what makes you feel so intensely that you're almost angry about it. You know, when I came back from Costa Rica, I could not conceive that a few hundred miles away, I live in such fortune. I have such an amazing family. I've received every opportunity you could ever think of. And 500 miles away, my host sister has one pair of flip-flops that are worn through in the heels, and that's it. And I just, and that was my first experience of like, what? And there are things, everybody has moments where somebody says something to them about the way that the world works or the way that it is or what's real. And you just think, what? Is that really true? And so I think if you find, those three things, what you enjoy, what you're good at, and what makes you kind of lights your fire, just makes you kind of like a knee jerk, I think if you find the intersection of those three places, of those three lines, that's how you discover your niche. That's where you're meant to expand, to fill that space. And I feel like having gotten closer to it, I feel like I'm getting closer every day. And my niche is expanding every day. And so I am expanding every day. And for a long time, I could not connect all the things that I love with what I'm supposed to do. And I think that once you do enough things, you can look at that big picture and recognize the pattern. And this is where my likes intersect with my skills and intersect with what I care about. It's literally a matter of exposing yourself to enough experiences that you can start to look at the pattern in the big picture.
You know what's great, Jessica, is listening to you. You're so articulate and so incredibly articulate in being able to describe how to do that, and just breaking it down like you just did right there into those three. And that's not easy for a lot of people. I think that's a tremendous skill that you have, and so I'm really really excited to be able to share what it is that you're doing.
It's so interesting. It's so interesting that you say that, just because I knew at one point that words were one of my lines, but I didn't know what the other lines were. So in speaking and in writing, I know that words are one of my lines, but that's just one part of it, And so it's how I'm meant to give back.
So I want to take a little bit of time here, and at the end of the show, I always love to, and this is I know what the listeners really like to hear, is delving into the habits of our guests. And so a couple questions here just to kind of get inside the brain, get inside the inner workings of Jessica Masters. Coolest last name in the world, by the way. All right, so just to start, what is your current read? What are you reading these days? It's okay if you're not, just curious.
That's okay. No, well, actually, you mentioned The Alchemist. I just reread The Alchemist. And
reread, yeah.
And I just got a book of poetry by Rumi, because he's been on my mind. He just has such a beautiful way of expressing oneness with the world, and I had this essay assignment when I was in university, and it was describe the non-duality of the duality and the non-duality. And at the time, I hadn't been going to class, and I was just like, what? Like, what is going? It was Eastern religions, and but ever since then, understanding paradoxes, like, so we like to think of the truth in terms of it's good or it's bad, or it's up or it's down. We think in dualities, and it's really difficult to reconcile things that are both things at once, those paradoxes. But I've just become fascinated by them. And I think Rumi does a really great job of exploring the truthness of paradoxes.
Yes, he most certainly does. In fact, actually, I was at the bookstore earlier today, and I was looking at, there's a big illustrated one. I don't know who made it, but a really beautiful illustrated book of Rumi's works and poetry. So
I bet that's beautiful.
Yeah, it's neat, and I think for a lot of our listeners that haven't really explored Eastern lines of thought, it's always fun, especially if you're growing up with Western lines of thought, to really take a look at traditional Eastern thought, and it really does allow you to bring both parts of the brain to play. Mm-hmm. So, all right, so let's talk a little bit about productivity and morning rituals. I always share with my guests that I am I'm a little bit obsessed with morning rituals. I like to it comes from my endurance, athleticism, and training, and getting training workouts so you can fit that stuff in. And when I used to want to be an Olympian, even though that didn't even come close to working out, um, I got into this habit of morning rituals. And so, can you tell us a little bit about, if you don't have one, no worries, but do you have a morning ritual that you do that kind of starts your day off right? And even if it changes every day or whatever, but what do you do?
Well, actually, I have a secret.
You're going to share a secret.
I will
Okay,
share my
cool.
secret. And this secret, this will change your life. And it has to do with being a conscious dreamer and consciously deciding to approach life with the intention of influencing the outcomes of your own experience and in the world. So I wrote I wrote down some affirmations about a year ago. I just wrote down everything that I wanted to be true about the way that I am, the way that my life is, as though it were actually true. So, for example, I realized that I was not really listening well to other people. And so I wrote down, I am actively listening to what others say, and other things like that. And I changed them as events develop in my life, and I want to focus in different areas. So if I started with sort of personal things, and then as I was getting into my professional work, and it was, I'm empowering others to dream big on purpose. And then when I got sick, it was, I am what is it? I am quickly regenerating my myelin sheath, and I am strengthening my quads and my glutes and everything. And so anyway, so the secret is that when I wake up, as soon as I realize that I'm no longer sleeping, I say them. I say them in my head, and so I've memorized them. And so I say them when I wake up and when I go to sleep. And I used to meditate. I've fallen off the meditating recently, but whenever I have a chance of when I'm close to unconsciousness, you want to get it. So your conscious mind will reject it. It'll say, that's not true. That's not who you are. That's not what's happening. You're sick, or you're not listening, or whatever. But the trick is to convince your subconscious mind. You want to bypass the conscious critic and get into your subconscious mind, which will, after about a month of saying these things to yourself, your mind will start scanning your environment for different evidence than it always does. So you've seen, when you're thinking about somebody, when somebody's on your mind, everything reminds you of them, right? It's the same concept, that if you believe that you are broke, then you're always going to be scanning your environment for evidence that you're broke. Whereas if you believe that you are wealthy, you will be scanning your environment for different feedback. And it's really just sort of you trick your brain into seeing your world differently, and it really does impact what you feel is true and how you see your world.
So I love that. And I'm a big believer in affirmations as well. And let's just make sure that our listeners understand that, because I didn't know what affirmations were.
Yeah.
When I first heard it, I was like, what?
Well, what was one of yours?
So what's the definition of affirmations, right? They're statements that you say to yourself, correct? And that's really it, right?
Yep.
Okay, so
in the positive.
In the positive, right?
You don't want any negative words in there.
So let's have a little bit of fun with this, okay? So I'll share one affirmation that I use, and then what's one affirmation that you use, and then we'll say that again, and our listeners will either turn off the radio or turn off the podcast, or they'll hopefully say them with them. So Jess, can you talk a little bit about what exactly is a dreamer in your mind, and what are the benefits of dreaming big?
Well, Mark, first of all, I believe that everybody is a dreamer. Just by virtue of being human, I think that we all have the capacity to dream. And everybody starts out in this vast world of possibility. And then as we get older, we've all experienced people trying to take our dreams away from us, or say that they're not valuable, or dismiss us as naive. And I call those people dream poachers. And I believe that they most deserve our compassion, because they've chosen to live in this small walled-off section of this vast and beautiful world. And it affords them, a familiar vantage point and a feeling of safety, and, a sense of security. But it functions as a sort of little mini prison, that they occupy in their mind. And from it, a lot of things appear impossible. And so I think that when we're confronted with people that we want to call dream poachers, I think the real challenge and the real gift is to feel compassion for them, because they've really just internalized that fear that our society thrives on so much. And in terms of dreaming big, I mean, everybody can benefit from just a dreamer who is actualized, believes that what they can imagine for themselves and for the world is one potential future reality for the world that we live in. And everything that we do and everything that we think influences the experience that we have. And so I think that there are so many different ways to dream big. Like we were talking about earlier, positive thinking, suspending your doubts, just suspending disbelief for long enough for the world to show you what it's made of. And paying attention to what Paulo Coelho calls in The Alchemist the one language of the world. The whole world speaks the same language, and everything's written by the same hand. And so, that's.
So, no, I love that, and I was just jotting some notes down, because it's funny how you keep quoting Paulo Coelho, because I think he was one of the main influences on me too, especially when I was at the university as well. So, you got me thinking here about dreaming big, and this is something that a lot of people are talking about, and very few people are actually doing it like you are, and you're helping people do it as well. And now I might be crazy, and feel free to call me out if I am, but I think back, I think that 1995-ish time, when the internet was really born, and things were really starting to come into the lifestyles of most people. People were able to access the internet without the nasty AOL signs or sounds, and to now, where the internet is in the pocket of teenagers, and we're able to connect on such a global level with the click of a button in a millisecond, and you're able to talk to someone when they're on the top of Mount Everest. I mean, these amazing things that have never been possible in the history of mankind. And I think that 1,000 years from now, 2,000 years from now, whatever, people are going to be looking back at this time in history and saying that this was the time of massive innovation. This was the time where dreams, even the silliest of the silly dreams, were able to come true. And in the 1500s, when Johann Gutenberg, I think it was, right, that invented the printing press, everything that was like the innovation time when ideas were able to spread. And then now ideas are able to spread on a level that is far greater than that could have ever been predicted. So I think you're onto something, Jess, with this idea of dreaming big.
Hey, I think so. Talk about that app that I read an article about, an app that you can just point your phone at a building in whatever city that you're in, and it'll just come up with all the historical and cultural information about it. The way that we learn is changing so fast, and you're right, we are just getting onto that train that's going to rocket off into the future. And I just think that we are the people who believe in it, that things are impossible. I think that it's a great travesty. I think it's, you're missing out. I think you're just missing out on all the great possible things that are going to realize themselves in the near future.
Right, and you bring up the idea of being able to point the smartphone at a building and being able to get the information, and that makes me think of what you said earlier with the role of education and how we learn.
Exactly.
And more than ever, you don't really. I'm going to offend people here and say it, but you don't need to go to the Ivy schools. You don't need to go beyond the Ivy League to be able to talk to those professors. That used to be the main reason. You would be able to talk with the smartest of the smart people. Be able to get inside their minds and say, and tap into their beautiful understanding of content. But the truth is that Google will always win. At least 99% of the time. I mean, Bobby Fischer lost eventually to the computer, and sadly the smartest content memorized professor is going to lose to Google, at least
Yeah.
in the short run, at least. So
But what are we missing? I mean, you have to take it even a step further. So with all this evolving technology, the professor becomes obsolete. But human connection will never be obsolete. And the more we integrate with technology and the less we reach out to the people around us for that information that we can get through Google, the more isolated and the more alienated we can feel from each other. And I think that that is the real danger of all of this exciting, all these exciting developments. I think that we have to be aware of that alienating, thing that force that's going on at the same time. And that's why I really, if I, one thing I would say to anybody who's struggling to figure out anything about their life, go outside. Go outside and spend time in nature by yourself with nothing else except your attention and just like listen and feel, because that groundedness is leaving us. We are if you read, oh my goodness, what's it called? He talks about nature deficit disorder, and how our generation is the last generation who has any real conception that the woods used to be a part of our, and that living off the land and that connection to the land, that groundedness. We are the last generation. I'm lucky, I grew up in it, but our generation as a whole kind of only distantly remembers that it could be another way. Whereas the generations coming up after us have no idea that it could be another way. They are so disconnected from the natural world and from each other. And it's I don't want to say that it's scary, but I think that we should be really cognizant of the isolating and alienating effects of all of the exciting technology that's moving us forward. And
I forget who it was who came up with the term, but what was it? FOMO, right?
Yeah,
the fear of missing out.
Yeah, Insta life. I will say I just got on Instagram, and my friend schooled me. He said you have to put the @ sign in front of my name if you want me to hear you what you're saying. And so I said, teach me the ways of Insta life, and I was just joking, but it really got me thinking about the fear of missing out, because everything is happening. It's such this constant 24-hour news cycle. Everything, social media is like refresh, 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 and it really, the danger of Insta life is all of those things that Priya Parker talked about in her and when she did the visioning lab with us, and her TED talk about FOMO. It's a real anxiety that it instills in the people who are caught up in it. And if you are suffering from Insta life, I swear the quickest remedy: go outside on a nice day.
That's what I was thinking of when I heard you say that. I'm like, what would be the easiest way to kind of, what would be the pill to take if you had, if you recognized FOMO in your lifestyle? I'm like, well, I mean, what doesn't change very much? I'm like, go and watch some trees.
It's constantly changing. I mean, the energy, when you're outside, the energy of the natural world is constantly transforming and moving, even on the smallest level, and you're part of that, and it makes you, start with 5 minutes, and you will want to go back for 10 minutes, if you give it all of your attention for that. It's just, you're part of it. It is literally our home. When you think of the word home, I'm lucky. I have a great family. I have a physical space in the world where I am at home, and I will always have that. But for people who don't have a real grounded sense, that anchor, that family, that safe space in the world, nature is there. Nature is yours. It's ours. It belongs to everybody, and it's where we come from. That's where we return to. So.
Right. So any other habits that you kind of have as we close off the interview here? Any other habits that you kind of have that make you stay productive or help you stay productive?
Yeah, I'm a real big fan of lists, and then sub lists that break each thing on the master list into a million different steps, because it makes you feel really productive to check off each component task.
Like
also,
like GTDs, getting things done, kind of.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Sure. And also every morning I wake up early before everybody goes off to work, and I have coffee with my roommates, and I throw out whatever I'm thinking of. I'm working on this, and we just have what we call yellow chair talks because of the yellow chairs in the kitchen. And I really believe that collaboration, that's where your good ideas get lovingly torn apart and replaced with something better. If you surround yourself with critical thinkers and people who are trying to actualize themselves as dreamers in their own right, in their own lives, then I think better things come out of collaboration and critique. So that's how I start my morning after I get out of bed. With coffee, by the way. Coffee's
Good,
big.
good. I'm huge. I drink way too much coffee, but I love it.
Oh,
Okay.
and NutriBullet. Juice
What?
vegetables. I juice vegetables and fruits every morning.
There you go. There you go. So Jess, thank you very much. I think that you've helped us and helped our listeners prevent the midlife crisis. So maybe the Corvette industry will go out of business. You never know. But I want to thank you again for coming on the show. I know your time is very valuable. Could you help us out here? And for our listeners that are stoked on your ideas, could you let them know where they can find you and any of your contact information that you wish to share on the show?
Sure. You can find me at www.earthhorn.org. And soon I'm rebuilding shuckitlist.com. So that's SHUCKLAST.com. And yeah, you can get in touch with me there. And Jessica at earthhorn.org is my email. If you want to reach out and ask me any questions or share your thoughts about what it means to be a dreamer or voice your, existential quandary, I would love to hear from anybody. Love to hear from you.
All right. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Jessica. You enjoy the rest of your day.
Okay. Thanks, Mark. You too. Bye-bye.
Take care.
All right, well, that about does it for episode 2 of The Traveling Cup. Please hop on over, join the conversation at thetravelingcup.com. There you will be able to post your comments and thoughts on this podcast and also link together with other dreamers like yourself to make things happen. If you happen to be as obsessed with a damn fine cup of coffee like myself, feel free to join the monthly coffee club by sending in your email address on the website at thetravelingcup.com. Each month, you'll receive coffee from a micro roaster whose story will be shared on the blog, and you'll also receive in the mail inspiring words from an up-and-coming poet. We're about making things happen at the Traveling Cup, one cup at a time. Thanks for tuning in, and I look forward to seeing you at the club.